Hey everyone, I'm Michael Stellabotte. For the Neumann University Players filmed production of Julius Caesar in the fall of 2020, I was the director of photography and editing, so this is my D.O.P.E diary. A behind-the-scenes look at the process of bringing this show from our stage to your screens. In any production, whether it be film or theater, or in this case, both, there needs to be structure to build the rest of the creative work on top of. Usually it comes in the form of a script. Shakespeare penned this play, and it was up to the director and assistant director, John K. Baxter and Ashley Diamond, to modify and cut down this script to suit our needs, and use that through the rehearsal process with the cast and crew. My directing duties come in when deciding how to best capture on camera what's happening throughout each scene, whether it be on the page or on the stage, in order to give the audience the best seats in the house. I say seats plural because, unlike a typical in-person performance where people pick their seat and they stick with it throughout the entire show, we were able to decide when to shift the position of the audience in relation to the cast, whether it be front row, back row, aisle, or middle, or even on stage with us, or taking on the direct point of view of one of our characters, seeing things through their eyes. We could decide that through the camera angles and cutting between them in the edit process. I essentially had to choreograph the blocking of the cameras, in a similar way to how actors may receive instruction on how to move throughout a scene. I did this using these rough sketch diagrams that would give a sort of visual representation of what angles we need throughout the scenes. This is similar to the process of storyboarding in filmmaking, but the difference is we're showing where things are happening rather than what things are happening. Due to scheduling conflicts, we were unable to film a full traditional theater run-through of this show. Instead, we had to film each scene individually and then Frankenstein them all together in post. We did this over the course of 6 shooting days in the span of 2 weeks, and we had multiple scenes scheduled per day. We only had a couple of takes to get things right, 1 or 2 full ones, and maybe even a third that would just redo specific actions in the form of pickup shots for coverage. In addition to the time that it takes to film all of this stuff, we also needed time to set up the cameras, take them down and move them to new positions, and we needed time for the cast and crew to get into costumes, get into mics, and set up the lights. When it came time to actually shooting a scene, there would always be at least 2 cameras recording, sometimes even 3, depending on what the scene needed. That way, best case scenario, we'd have multiple angles to cut between, and worst case scenario, if one of the angles doesn't work, another might. With every take, we'd always start with a wide shot. One of the cameras would be trying to encapsulate the entire stage, while the other camera would be zoomed in or punched in a little bit closer to get things in better detail, and maybe pan around and follow the action on stage up close. But either way, the cameras would physically be far away in proximity to the stage. And with each consecutive take, assuming we'd get it right, we'd be able to bring the cameras closer to the cast, and sometimes even ditch the stationary static tripods for a more handheld filming technique. This could be helpful for some of the more stylized sequences in the show, such as what the cast likes to call the stabby death time, aka the money shot of the show, as well as the assembly of the conspirators in the garden, and even the military standoff towards the end of the show. These types of camera styles mixed in with the more stationary shots would provide this kinetic energy and momentum to certain shots and give a more dynamic feel to the film, in a way that you would have a little bit more so if you were in person. The camera is essentially a character, bearing witness to what's happening on stage, so it adds this whole other dimension to an already fantastically blocked and performed show. All of this work was in no way a one-man job. Shoutouts go to the Nightflix Film Club for helping us arrange the camera rentals throughout the duration of the shoot, as well as the camera crew, Deanna Stellabotte, Marissa Lalone, Andrew Donachie, and AJ Tenari for operating the cameras and equipment, and for carrying out the vision for each shot and each scene.
Camera cut! Hold for reviewing footage!
Walk in front of my shot.
Take a picture, right?
I'm doing a video, hopefully to cut the shit.
Oh, checking the other footage.
I thought you could do like the full clip. The High School Musical.
I mean, not High School Musical. Absolutely not High School Musical. We'd never do that to you, Max.
No, that's my only veto.
You ever did another
Ladies and gentlemen, that is over! Cut that shit!
Although the cast and crew could take a sigh of relief once filming had wrapped, the show was far from curtain call for me. I organized everything in advance for the post-production stage into a series of folders, that way it could be easier to edit. The original game plan was to have all 16 scenes be divided among a team of 4 editors, myself included. Once each of these scenes individually were edited, they'd be passed off for sound effects editing and back to me for the assembly film edit. However, due to unexpected circumstances, this plan changed overnight, and I was tasked with editing all of the scenes by myself. This was a stressful challenge full of sleepless nights working around the clock in order to get everything edited in time for our December 8th deadline, but that makes me all the more proud of how everything ultimately turned out. All of the scenes were edited using DaVinci Resolve, but before I could actually cut them together, there were a couple of steps involved. I needed to create a new project file, import all the footage, and then, in our particular case, we had to fix the audio so you could hear it through both ears rather than just one like it was originally recorded through the cameras. Once all of that work was done, I could then sift through all of the takes that we shot and figure out which ones were the best to use. Using this slate here with the act, scene, and take we were on, I'd be able to figure out which ones were the most usable and match them up with the other camera angles we had for the same performances. Then, with this marker board, or clapper, I'd be able to sync up the sound so the video and audio would run simultaneously, rather than one being faster or slower than the other. I would pick the best audio track to use and use that throughout the take I was working with, and then cut between the different camera angles when necessary. I tried to find a healthy balance between blending the camera cutting of filmmaking with the longer form takes of theater. And additionally, to enhance that more theatrical side of things, I would add cross-dissolve digital transitions between these camera cuts to blend one shot into the next and give it a more recital-style flow. The only exception to this would be when a character gets stabbed, a common and thematic occurrence throughout the show. These moments needed to stand apart from the rest of the edit, especially since if we did use the cross-dissolve digital transition at times, it could sacrifice the performance unfolding on screen. Specifically in Stabby Death Time, when one conspirator goes in for a kill, the other might already overlap as a result of that blurring from one camera angle to another. I would usually stick with the most usable take as long as possible, with inserting pickup shots as needed to show some better things in detail or show things that were maybe off camera in the wide shots. And then I would also use previous takes' sounds in order to reinforce the natural sound captured in camera for the scene I was working with, such as enhancing the crowd chanting or signifying a door being used off screen. Once all of the basic assembly editing was done, I could then go into each camera cut and modify the shot as needed. So, cropping, digital image stabilizing, and color grading in order to fix whether a shot is off-center or off-alignment, or if a shot was a little bit too shaky, which sometimes this would be a 50-50. If the camera was too shaky, it'd look a little weird with the digital effects. And sometimes a shot would be too bright or too dark, too muted in color palette, or too saturated. Once all of this was done, I would then finally be able to render and export the scene from the editing software into a viewable video. And then, once it was exported, I could watch it back with other sets of eyes to make sure there weren't any other things that needed to be changed before considering a scene completed. This process would take a lot of time. The editing alone could take hours or even days, and the exporting could take over an hour or an hour and a half, depending on how many edits were involved and how long the scenes actually were. Once all of these scenes were officially edited and exported, I could then send them off for additional sound effects editing from our sound designer, Julianne Shalmo. She would incorporate sound effects that we couldn't capture in camera, such as battle cry or thunder. Once she would edit these audio files and pass them back over to me, I could align them with the video editing that I did for the scenes and then assemble them into a final film cut. Add some vanity cards, title cards, and rolling credits, and then we'd have a fully edited film that could be exported and uploaded to YouTube, which is what you can watch now. Before I go, I need to give one last shout out to my fellow Neumann University players for contributing your time and your talent towards making this theater film possible. What you all brought to the table made this monumental milestone a reality, and it couldn't have been done without you. So, here's to looking forward to what we're able to do next in the shows that follow this one. For everyone watching, thank you so much for your time, and I hope you enjoyed this as well as Julius Caesar. And I hope you'll stay tuned for more that's in store.